What chain of events happened one by one to lead Germany, a proud nation, to absolute desolation, to destruction that led to the coming of a certain person you probably know about that happened in the 20s and 30s? How did they fall so far from grace to the point where their money was worthless? We're going to break it down and we're going to compare it to America today. I'm Jarrod Wright. This is the Right Wing. Let's get into it.
The Right Wing has been excellent.
Jarrod Wright,
Christian nationalist influencer.
If you've been around for like any period of time, you've probably heard of Weimar Germany, of the Weimar Republic. It was the period of time after World War I and before World War II, before Hitler took over. What you see within this nation, this democracy, this turn to democracy, is you see the nation fall apart. You see issues spring up. You see a social revolution, social liberation, some people call it, where things became normalized that were never normalized. You see extreme hyperinflation. And ultimately, you see in a few short years, a grand scale version of how democracy will fail. What will happen? We're going to break the whole thing down. What exactly was it? How did it happen? And how is America resembling that right now? Are we Weimar 2.0? These things, they seem to be connected. A lot of people make this comparison. We're going to actually break it down today. You're going to enjoy it. So when did the Weimar Republic start? Really, most people would track it back to the end of World War I. When you're looking at the 1918 time period, it was actually the Social Democrats, the controlling party of the Weimar Republic, who gave up in World War I, who actually signed the Treaty of Versailles. The king at the time, the monarch, had actually stepped down to protect his public image. And he said, you know what? I see we're going to lose this thing more than likely. I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to democracy before it gets bad, before I get beheaded. That was sort of his idea behind everything was, hey, I got to figure something out. So y'all have it. They actually signed the Treaty of Versailles. Now, the Treaty of Versailles really leads to a lot of the issues that you see within Germany. Just a few things on the treaty. They lost 13% of their land. And this was a relatively crucial 13%. This wasn't like just a random amount. This was important land. There were different industrial complexes, things like that were there. As far as everything else, they've lost 10% of their population, but with the war, they lost lots of agricultural territory. They lost lots of iron production. That was huge. Coal, things like that. And they had to pay back reparations. I'm talking lots of reparations. They basically took the blame for all of World War I. It was really a pretty unfair treaty, but it was signed. That's what was signed. So they're immediately put into a spot of, this ain't looking too good. This is not a good spot you want to be in if you're a German at the time. You went from this proud monarch society to a society that just had to take all of the blame, pay the reparations, lose their land, lose a lot of people. People were upset, but they said, you know what? We want democracy. This is the West. We want democracy. Let's move forward. So they keep kind of moving and going in a direction. And at first, it wasn't all terrible. Things were decent. The roaring 20s were good for most people. But what we saw specifically within Germany was we saw, one, an uprising of people saying, well, hey, wait a second. Poland gets this big strip of land that was ours. Look at all the Germans that are there who didn't want to be Polish. They wanted to be German. And on top of that, the new government basically says, look, we're going to allow inflation to happen at a slightly higher rate because that way people will borrow money. They will invest in infrastructure, but then it'll be easier to pay back because it's worth less. $100 today in a year, that might be worth what $50 was. So then they can pay it back. We're going to try to adjust wages. You had these different, social groups, workers groups that were trying to adjust the wages accordingly with the inflation. And I'll give them this. At first, they did a halfway decent job of it, but it's impossible to keep up with because what eventually happened is it got out of hand. Within the span of like 3 years, you go from having a normal wage. There was actually 65 German Reichs. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. $1 American would be worth barely anything. It would take one Reich to make up 65 American dollars. It was like one of the strongest notes in the world. One German Reich made up 65 American dollars. You think now, up until recently, we were the strongest bill in the world. That's why everything was based around us. But then Germany was much, much stronger. This fell apart in like 3 years to the point where I think it became something like 42 trillion German Reichs to $1. And naturally, you can't keep up. Whenever this crazy hyperinflation happens in a short period of time, wages can't keep up. You can't keep up with everything will collapse. I seen videos in school. There were actually people that would wheelbarrow the Reichs and throw it into the fire. It was cheaper than buying firewood to just go get the German Reichs and just throw them into the fire to keep the heat going. It got out of hand so quickly when it comes to economics, because they allowed this inflation to happen, saying this will be good for the economy. We're going to stimulate the economy. That did not happen. That was not the case. And that's one of the issues that you see here. Another issue you see a very similar Bolshevik uprising within the government. You have very Jewish people who took over the government, who began gaining lots of control in the government, eventually even some of them rising up to the very top. This is disheartening for the German folk because they're a German people. They're not a Jewish people. They wanted a German-led government. But when it comes to democracy, when you have lots of influx of people coming from other places into this one spot, which is Germany, what you're going to see is people start voting for who they want. And groups of people tend to vote for their group of people to attain power. And this particular group of people has been known for gaining power in places and then running the nation. This has happened time and time again. We see it in our nation now. We saw it in Russia right before this. Perfect example, the Bolshevik Revolution, the Bolsheviks in Russia, what happened there, the Holodomor, those events stimulated what was to come in Germany because people saw it. They said, whoa, we do not want this to happen here. It was like just a couple years right after. So these, Jewish folks start moving up the ladder, as you could say, within politics. When they move up that ladder, they start gaining control. They start doing things that are very Jewish, you could say, as far as what their culture represents and does. And so they start pushing things like interest rates. They start allowing this social liberation phase to happen. This is why you see people like Magnus Hirschfeld. He opened the College of Sexology. And this college was 100% focused on essentially transgenderism. This was the first transgender clinic in the whole world. He was the father of transgenderism, of actually performing sex change surgeries, of studying gays and everything else. And so this liberation period, you saw these gay people, these transgenders, start running around everywhere. You saw a massive influx of pornography. You saw a massive influx of just sexual immorality, of just heinous acts. This was not what the German people were known for. This was a proud people. And now this completely influx with this disgusting filth everywhere. That is not what was supposed to happen, but it did when certain people gained control. That's the ultimate truth to it. So people began to realize, hey, I don't think this is going to work too good. And what you saw was in the early 20s, a certain person, I don't know if we can even say his name, began to rise to power, speaking out against these things directly. He said, this is not good. Look what's happened. Look what these people have done. He was witnessing it in Russia. He kind of studied it to an extent and said, look what these people have done to the government. They've ruined the government. We're not proud. We're addicted to porn. Sexology is happening. What books did he burn? It was those. It was the transgender books. It was the Jewish books. That's what he burned. It wasn't knowledge. You were told it was knowledge. He came in and he burned the books about transgenders. He said, we don't want this in our society. It was really a good act. No matter what you view him as, that was a good act. And so this movement began to rise. Weimar Germany was an absolute failure. I'm talking, it literally only took less than a decade and it completely collapsed. Hyperinflation, complete cultural degradation, complete loss of control of your government to a foreign people within a decade. It's like a macrocosm, right? It's like or a microcosm, I guess you could say. It's like the small scale version of what we're seeing in America. That was like the fast forwarded version, and it collapsed, and we see why. Late stage democracy, late stage republics will always fall and lead to a dictator, which is exactly what happened in Germany. And the people loved that dictator because he was restoring them back to their principles. Now, did he do bad things? I'm sure that he did. Did he do the worst of the worst things? You know, that's up for debate, I guess, nowadays. The reality is that people loved him because he said, I'm going to save this nation. And I want to do it on the basis of God. That's what he actually came in with, Christian morals. So it's an interesting thought process. And then you say, well, that kind of sounds like the United States. Hyperinflation, we can't afford anything. The dollar's growing faster than our salaries. Interest rates are through the roof. There's a particular occupation of our government where a particular nation controls it. You go, whoa, this is interesting. How does this translate? Are we sure that this is what we want? Are we going to fall in this manner? Is a character like the painter going to rise up and essentially restore us back? I see it happening. I really do, because history repeats itself. We saw this in Russia. We saw the Bolshevik Revolution. So then it was adjusted within Germany. We saw the uprising that happened. And now we're in America. And you may ask yourself, well, how did we get here? Well, it all starts with things like the Federal Reserve in 1913. It starts with when we allow the control to happen. We allow mass immigration in. Yes, this was one of the ways they tried to weaken the German people or weaken any state that they control. Because once you can bring in an influx of other nations and cultures and say, hey, it's a great melting pot, which was coined by a Jew, by the way, the great melting pot comes in and completely ruins your culture. That's not to say they're crappy people. Some of them are. It is to say, if you want your culture, go have your culture in your nation. Don't bring your culture to our culture. We have this culture in this nation. That's what we want. That's how we united as an American people. But they realized if we can somehow trick people into having white guilt, we can bring in all these other people, all these other cultures, completely overcrowd what we have going on, completely drain the government-funded systems, and ruin the culture. And that's what they're doing here. This is part of the hyperinflation, a housing crisis. Well, now you have 100 million people that maybe shouldn't be here. That's a lot of people you got to put in houses. So the average American, the average heritage American can't even buy a house because these people are coming and taking and renting them. And, you got other issues like BlackRock, also owned by the same people, government control happening by the same people, through different versions of occupation, not necessarily directly, though many have dual citizenship. They're taking money. They're blackmailing. This is a very well thought out scheme. Even though I'm on the bad side of it, I will look at it and say, you know what? They did a good job. They got us bad. I mean, they freaking brought the hammer down. We are at their beck and call. I can't even say the word. That's how you know they're at their beck and call. That's how you know we're in a bad spot right now. That's what's so crazy about this situation. You look at the gays, the transgenders, that's supposed to be normalized now. It's so normalized that even our conservative president is now okay with sex change surgeries before 18 if the parents allow it. They shouldn't be allowed, period. Let alone in the children. Are you kidding me? I see stories of these people. I go to Disney and these boys put on dresses and wigs. I'm like, this is disgusting. The parents have a mental illness and should be arrested. Their books should be burned. You know what I mean? It should be completely eradicated. It's not good. You're ruining the mental health of your children because you already have a mental illness. And it's a demonic influence, 100%. It's a demonic influence. And we see these things stacking up. We see the control. We see the hyperinflation. We see the absolute social liberation, aka sodomy, aka sin being normalized in society. We are very close to an uprising. Soon, a leader will rise. Just wait. He will rise up. He will gain a lot of backing because a lot of people are already feeling this way. We want to return to our Christian morals. We are at the late stage of Weimar 2.0, the Weimar Republic 2.0. Every republic falls and it falls to a dictatorship. We've made it 250 years. We've made it longer than any republic ever. And you think that we're not going to fall soon? Connect the dots. History repeats itself. That's biblical. History will repeat itself. Nothing is new under the sun, Solomon said. You need to be watching out. You need to be looking for the signs of when things are going to go south. If you're going to be looking, if you're interested in this content, I'm Jarrod Wright. This is the Right Wing. Make sure you follow along. Make sure you hit the buttons down below. Give me a follow. Give me a subscribe. Turn the notifications on. I'm getting banned everywhere, so that kind of sucks. But until next time, I hope you have a great day.